Welcome back, guys. This is part 3 of the codependency interview with my boyfriend.
Hey.
And we have now refreshed ourselves, walked around a little bit, got a little bit of a break, so we're fresh and ready to go, hopefully. So, in this part, I really wanted to talk about your own addiction with video games, but before that, maybe we should kind of finish up the origins codependency stuff. So can you kind of tell me about your thoughts and feelings as in the codependent mind, about other people or even our own relationship, kind of like the negative aspect of being a codependent?
Yeah, so I think for me, and it's just like a part of me, perhaps that was instilled into me from my parents, specifically my mother. I would be very insecure about myself and very judgmental of other individuals. So it was always a negative criticism of other people, how they're not doing such and this and that. But I think it was more of me projecting myself into these other individuals and, where that just, it got to the point where I was being very negative. We would just communicate and try to talk about a conversation or topic starter, and that's what it would become. It would lead into that.
Kind of like a defensiveness.
Yeah.
Like those fleas that you kind of picked up from your mom and, and stuff like that. Like being defensive about certain things or, certain topics just were kind of like off and not talkable about.
So being very passive aggressive and codependent, I would, basically be nice into some conversation or someone if they were the relevant topic, and then just when I wasn't around them, or if I just had something to say, I would just like be very nasty and just be very negative about that person and not trying to understand about person A or person B, put myself into their shoes, or see it from their perspective. But I think it's because as a codependent, you are already insecure about things, and you just, I don't know.
For me, I think just to kind of jump in, I think you kind of don't have, not you, I'm just saying it as a codependent person, myself included, you kind of feel like you don't have a sense of self, and that everyone else around you has everything figured out, and that makes you feel insecure, and it's like it makes you angry, and it just makes you feel very like resentful of other people. And if they have something that you don't or that you want, it can be like a physical thing, or it can be like a relationship, or something like that, or say this person gets a home loan or a promotion at work and you don't.
Yeah.
You can get jealous and very strange about it.
Yeah. So personally, and that's a great example, is, I work in a corporate job, and, when I first went into that kind of job role, I had no experience or basically knowledge of the corporate world. I just knew like I wanted to hit the ground running and achieve all these, accomplishments, see how far I can get. And realistically, it just wasn't meant to be the timing, certain positions and roles. It was just going to gradually happen, and whatever happened, especially in the corporate world, you just go with it, It's thinking on your toes, really. And whenever I saw other individuals get certain accolades or certain promotions and I didn't, I felt that, there was an injustice, this and that happened, when it was beyond my control and more than what I can do, in that moment in time. It just wasn't meant to be with those specific roles and whatever the case was. So I would become very insecure and just be very judgmental of other people, and that rubbed off into my home life. So I was taking what was happening in my work environment and projecting that, and unfortunately that came home with me.
Yeah. What I was gonna say, real quick, sorry, just I'm just interjecting and interrupting you all the way, all the time. Um, it's not to say that you haven't done well in your career. I mean, you've been promoted like crazy. I mean, you started at entry level and now you're at a pretty high place. So you've been successful. I think it's just like in a codependent person's mind, it's never good enough.
Yeah,
You know.
it's that whole perfectionist thing that you can never truly achieve because we're not all perfect. It's okay to have humanistic, flaws and, things that you have to continuously work and improve on. It's okay to be flawed. It's okay to have great things that you are successful at and some other things in areas that you just have no experience in. That's part of being, who we are. And for me, I think that was imposed when I was a little kid that, you have to have all these straight A's, you have to do well, and anything but straight A's or whatever is awful. How are you supposed to, succeed in life? But the funny thing, I know I'm going off on a tangent on this, but
No, go ahead.
my parents were always enforcing, hey, you need to do well in school, your sisters do this, and you need to be like them. So it was pitting like me against the set standard.
Sorry, our cat is here. I don't know if anyone
here.
heard that.
So it was almost like, hey, they are at this level, you need to be there or excel. But the funny thing is my parents never did anything to kind of get us into those kind of situations or roles. Kind of going back to the very first conversation that we had.
The first book, part one.
Yeah, my parents were immigrants, so of course there was a language barrier. So not to say they couldn't, they just didn't try. But how were they supposed to or expected to, demand all these things when they themselves couldn't do it? And it's up to the child to kind of meet all these credentials and success when it was really solely on that child and no one else.
Right.
It was solely on that child to succeed in school, to pick up on the language, and to, hit all those, criterias and marks, in school to get that success. I wouldn't have put myself through college had it not been for myself, and it wasn't with the aid or financial assistance of my parents, or else I wouldn't have found my way into college had it not been for myself, So anyways, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. And I think sometimes that's one of the things that when you have toxic guardians or toxic parents, it kind of goes unsaid. It's like they expect you to do all these different things when they themselves are working class, and that's nothing wrong with that. But it's almost this expectation of you're going to pull me out of this when you're older, so you have to do this and that and the other to get yourself to this point, and then I'm going to take advantage of that.
Right.
Once I'm older, once you're an adult.
And that's not including the whole subject matter of a narcissist father who has a golden child or preferential towards certain kids and a disdain towards others.
Right.
So you have that kind of like power struggle into this, and it makes for a very complex kind of bad scenario too.
Yeah.
So, but sorry.
Oh no, it's fine. Can you kind of go over, and we don't have to get too in depth about it, but can you kind of go over, like I mentioned in one of my previous video about codependency that I had to take care of myself, and quit my job, and that kind of like took us down to one income, and kind of tell me how you felt about that.
So it was not a fun time. In my mind, growing up, even though things weren't worked on with the family, children kind of set dynamic, we were financially okay. And that's the values, unfortunately, that I grew up on. Even though my father, whenever I would see him on weekends or during summer breaks or whatever, he didn't care. He didn't put forth any sort of effort to make the home a loving kind of type nurturing environment. He just didn't care, you know. Um, but money was always something that he apparently had, and he made that the utmost value, you know, in your as to shaping into who you are. So for me, it was a security blanket. Not necessarily because I had to have all the money in the world. We were both working entry level positions at that
Right.
point with the
Yeah,
company.
we were.
We weren't making that much, you know, with our bills and whatever the case was.
Just normal everyday
Yeah,
stuff. I think we both had a little debt. Like I had some student loans that I had to pay off. Not very much.
Yeah. So, you know, financially, we weren't where we should have been because we were never taught that. That's a whole nother scenario,
Yeah.
situation. And we were starting out as a couple.
Right.
So things got personally for me, like it was very stressful. Like you said, we went to one income. I would just become so obsessed and fixated on numbers. So I would try to budget out when it really wasn't budgeting. It was more of watching the calculator say that we're going to hit negative or we weren't going to have enough money for this and that we're going to have to be in overdraft, whatever the case was.
Yeah.
Knowing that that's the situation that we were going to be in, rather than try and make positive of it, had I been able to, you know, and I'm not trying to make excuses for myself. I reverted to this defensiveness of blaming you that, you know, we're in this situation because of you, not because, you know, we're in this situation and let's see what we can do, try and make the best of it. Knowing that it's a financial struggle, let's try to make better in our lives and be happy, you know, be thankful for the things that we have, including our meowing cat that you may have heard. You know, I basically let that consume me. So every time if there was a issue about, oh, we can't afford this, or an emergency happened and we can't do this or that, or I have to, you know, run to my family for financial assistance or whatever, I blamed it on my partner, you know.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, of course, you should have been able to grow together, realize that things are hard, and you know, times are going to be a little bit tough and you can be upset here and there, but the way I was choosing to go about that, you know, it was never us. It was just everything was on you, you know. So I know it wasn't a fun situation to be in, that kind of, you know, relationship for that long until, you know, things would change.
And the thing is, for me, I didn't grow up not having a job. I mean, in my experience, my family are very independent. I'm an only child, and my parents have always had their own business from what I can remember. So I've been working since I was 11 years old. So my parents had a summer business. It was a seasonal type of a deal. So every summer we would open our shop, and I would be working with them. And then as time went on, and then I would go to school during the wintertime, of course. But then as time went on, I would be doing that. And then in the wintertime, I would also, when I was old enough, so when I was 14, I got a work permit. I was working, you know, at McDonald's. I was doing whatever job I could do after school because that was what you were supposed to do. So I was not really used to not working. I had been laid off, though, like I think the year before I came to live with you.
Yeah.
I'd been laid off from a very good corporate job because that was around the time everyone was starting to get laid off around those times.
Wasn't it during the recession?
Yeah.
So.
So I had been, I mean, I was in my early 20s. I mean, you know, but I was lucky enough to have a pretty good job at that time. So that's part of the reason why I came to a different state anyway, to live with him. But basically my point is so for me, I felt very guilty because that was something you were supposed to do and have all the time, is an income, is a job. Be independent. Don't let anyone else do for you or take care of you. You can take care of everything yourself. But in reality, my mom was helping me with most of my bills most of the time, even with the job I had.
Yeah.
Getting me groceries and things, and she was helping us when I first moved
Yeah.
here.
Honestly, when you first moved here, we were just, living off of barely what we were making, and it wasn't even enough. I was barely making minimum wage,
Yeah.
so it was like equivalent to, and not to throw shade or anything, it was like working fast food industry,
Right.
how much I was barely making. And I knew that I didn't have the ambition or drive to really want more. I was just living in the moment until it was like, hey, reality sets in and you need to find another job.
Right.
But yeah, during the time when we both eventually did work a corporate job, and when you chose to leave, I was very resentful, and I think at that time I kind of was self-loathing too. It was like, here I am. I didn't graduate from college, so I could hear my parents' voice like nothing was ever good enough. Plus that on top of it,
Yeah.
because in my mind, it's like once you graduate from college with a degree, you're going to get a job, hopefully a lucrative job, or whatever the case is, depending on your field. That was just wishful thinking, and it was not a reality.
Yeah.
A lot of people graduate and they just don't get
Well,
into the
especially
world.
in our generation, we're in our early 30s, so this generation,
Yeah.
we, if you're in our situation, you know that just going to college doesn't mean you're going to get a job automatically as it used to be.
Right. Times have changed, and there's a lot of colleagues that I work with where they have degrees in whatever various areas and fields where they're working side by side with me and basically doing something that they're not really meant to do. It wasn't their passion, so
Like they wanted to be an attorney, but they're in that corporate position,
yeah,
working alongside of you.
so we're just grueling it out, trying to meet the metrics and whatever the case is. So but yeah, it was a tough time, and I know I didn't help matters at all, and I'm just glad that we got past that, and that it wasn't just getting past it, but it's coming to terms and realizing that I had a lot of work to do in myself to come to terms that there were a lot of insecurities and flaws that stemmed from somewhere, dealing with this whole financial kind of like dependency, on something that we never truly really had between ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
So it was coming to terms and realizing where this is all originating from, and trying to work at that and realize, hey, you can do it, you can make it, and you don't need this dependency.
Right. And I think it's also, it's pretty evident now. I mean, this is supposed to be about gaming addiction. Sorry, guys,
We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. But, the thing is that we have gotten each year better and better financially, just like you should. Just like, as you get older, usually, you're getting in better positions and things like that. And so you're perfectly fine. And now we're great financially. But it's still in your brain. It's kind of like when you are a fat person and you lose a bunch of weight. And in your mind, you're still that fat person, even though you've lost, 1,000,000 pounds. No matter how much money you have, it never feels like it in your brain. It's never good enough. It's like, oh, I could always have more. I could always have this and that and the other. I could have a cushion, And I think that goes to show you, it's not necessarily the amount of money, it's your brain.
It's kind of like, in that scenario, it's coming to terms of being like, if you are a fat person, going through those losses, it's coming to terms to like love yourself, isn't
right.
it? In my case, it's like, money will never be enough. Even if I was making tons of it, it would never substantiate me, but it's coming to terms that, you can do just fine, and understand that you will be fine, as long as you take yourself out of that mindset, that it's never going to be enough,
Yeah. So kind of segueing into the video game addiction, I know that feeling of being insecure, feeling like you have no outlet, feeling those very familiar feelings probably crept back during that time when I quit my job and when we were kind of at a low, kind of maybe reminding you and maybe even giving you emotional flashbacks to, when you were a child and feeling vulnerable and helpless, and kind of using video games as a crutch.
Yeah. So just like many other households, we grew up with a Nintendo, played those games, and you were instantly hooked on Mario and all these other, great titles and iconic characters and whatever the case was. Everyone you knew had one. You could borrow cartridges and just kind of play them with family and friends, or, whatever the case was. It was just fun. We had one prior to my parents getting divorced, so it was always a good memory that I had at that time. And I believe the second generation was Super Nintendo, and I remember getting that for Christmas. My parents were divorced at that time, and it was the latest thing that came out. And I remember, it came in a bundle. It was Super Mario World plus 2 controllers and this SNES system. I played the thing out of that like nothing. And of course, we were financially okay. So I got whatever game I wanted. In some ways, going off on the far end here, I think it was my parents' way and my uncle's way of kind of, if it temporarily appeases him because he's here, then let's just get him that as long as he's happy. In my mind, even as a kid without knowing it, I was playing video games as an escape. The graphics, gameplay for what it was on a 16-bit system was very, prehistoric, I guess, compared to like games now and the standards or whatever. But it was very revolutionary for me, advancing from an 8-bit into 16 and playing all these different games. It was great. I got to escape, and I think that as I got older, heading into my 20s while I was in college, that's where I was in a bad kind of relationship and things just wasn't right. I got addicted to online gaming. I had colleagues that I would kind of play with, friends that I would say, who, it kind of creates this kind of like this environment or this kind of like group, and you supported each other by being on. So there was always somebody on, and we would play online games, FPSs, first-person shooters, and it was such a fun, exhilarating thing, and it was addicting. And for myself, that's all I ever found that I ended up doing. I eventually dropped out of college, not because of gaming addictions, because of other stuff that was playing on in my life at that time. But I turned to playing video games just because it was a crutch for me to kind of escape, to just do something, to just waste time. And I didn't really want to do anything else. I was content in that moment of not doing anything but just adding more countless hours into leveling up or unlocking certain achievements, or and I think that the way that it's set up in that structure, and plus having certain influence from certain individuals, it was hard to kind of let go. So that's pretty much what I did.
I know I grew up with video games as well. I didn't have my family wasn't as well off as yours, so I didn't have a lot of the same things. I got a Sega Genesis for one of my birthdays, and I had one game for it, and it was Spider-Man
Maximum Carnage or
something like that. And I played the heck out of that, and I rented games, but I never really was addicted like that because I didn't have a chance to be, I think. And then when I did play games, because I had got my own computer, I bought my own computer, again, with the money that I got from one of my jobs when I was in high school. So I would play a lot of games there, but it was like individual games. It wasn't online or anything like that. So for me, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So for me, I and the people I knew that played video games, including my father, my friends, we played video games casually. We could pick them up and put them down, and then do other things, have other hobbies as well. So when we moved in together, I kind of noticed something was off with the way that you would play as opposed to the way that my friends and I used to play.
Yeah, so to kind of give you a backstory.
Wait, can we just go to the next part? Because it's getting kind of long here. I'm gonna go ahead and end this.
Oh, okay.
So save that thought. Okay. So thank you guys so much again. This is running a lot longer than I thought, but hopefully you guys are enjoying this. So just hang tight for the next part.
We'll be talking about video games.
Yay!